In 1982, the Soviet Union began transporting parts of a new space launch system by air, strapping massive components to aircraft and flying them thousands of kilometers across the country. Their goal was to develop a competitor to the American Space Shuttle, a spacecraft and launch system known as Energia Buran. Like previous Soviet spacecraft, it was being constructed in aerospace factories in the West, but launched from sites located far away. However, unlike earlier designs, the Energia Buran parts were too large for railway transport, requiring them to be flown instead. In a hurry, the Soviets modified old bombers from the 1950s to handle the task. Unfortunately, these planes weren't powerful enough, they could only carry small parts, and even those had to be stripped of unnecessary weight. To transport the fully assembled components, some as long as 60 meters, a much larger aircraft was needed. The Americans faced a similar challenge and addressed it by converting Boeing 747s into shuttle carrier aircraft. These large, powerful jets were modified by reducing their weight, reinforcing the fuselage, and adding extra stabilizers. Additionally, the US utilized railroads and barges to move larger parts, with only the shuttle orbiter requiring air transport. The Soviets, on the other hand, had to airlift their entire launch system, including massive boosters and central rocket stages. With political pressure to start launches by 1988, engineers had to act fast. Their solution, the biggest aircraft the USSR had at the time, the Antonov An-124. Still under development in the early 80s, it would become the most powerful cargo plane in the world, arriving just in time for Energia Buran. But even the mighty An-124 wasn't enough. Engineers needed to go bigger. They extended the fuselage, added wing extensions, and equipped it with 2 additional engines. The reinforced frame could easily carry the Buran orbiter, but larger parts blocked the tail, leading to a redesign of the vertical stabilizer. To support its massive weight and prevent runway damage, they installed a new landing system with 32 wheels to distribute the load. This upgraded, colossal aircraft was named the An-225. It was unlike anything else ever built. With 6 turbofan engines producing a combined 309,000 pounds of thrust, it could carry almost twice the payload of its Western counterparts. The plane was so enormous, the Wright brothers' first flight could have taken place entirely within its cargo bay. The An-225's main role was to transport Energia Buran components, but engineers also had an ambitious secondary goal, to use the aircraft as a flying launch platform for space missions, something never done before. Thanks to its immense power, the 225 could carry a fully fueled spaceplane and payload into the lower stratosphere, where the spacecraft could then ignite its engines at an altitude of 8 kilometers. This method promised to reduce launch costs to just a tenth of what it would cost from the ground. The air launch system was designed to complement the Energia Buran program and was already in development by 1988. The Soviet plan was to build several An-225s, establishing them as the workhorses of their space program for years to come. In November 1988, they shocked the world by successfully launching the Buran on its first unmanned mission. Until that moment, many in the West were unaware the USSR had even developed its own space shuttle. A year later, the Soviets showed off both the Buran and the An-225 at the Paris Air Show, flying the enormous plane, complete with orbiter, into Western view for the first time. Spectators were amazed, but experts were baffled when the Soviets flew their brand new shuttle through a rainstorm, something NASA would have considered extremely risky. But by then, protecting the Buran was no longer a priority. By 1989, the Soviet Union was rapidly going bankrupt and could no longer fund the Energia Buran program. The Buran would never fly again. With no further need to transport rocket stages or orbiters, the An-225 became a showpiece at Western air exhibitions while the Soviets scrambled to find new uses for it. Ideas ranged from launching maritime rescue craft like Ekranoplans, to turning it into a platform for British spaceplane projects, or even converting it into a massive triple-decker passenger jet. None of these concepts moved forward. Then in 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. Soon after, the An-225 was mothballed and stored near Kyiv, Ukraine, where it was cannibalized for parts. The largest aircraft in the world seemed doomed to be scrapped. Following the USSR's collapse, Ukraine's Antonov Design Bureau struggled to attract clients for its aircraft, but found new life by leasing out its fleet for cargo transport. The An-124s, with unmatched lifting power, were in high demand for moving oversized equipment like power generators and trains. Yet occasionally, they faced cargo loads even too large for the 124. By the late 1990s, the case for reviving the An-225 was growing stronger. But bringing the An-225 back wasn't a simple decision. Unlike the smaller An-124, which was specifically designed for cargo operations, the Tu-25 was a product of the Soviet space race, with a heavily reinforced fuselage intended to carry large external loads. It also lacked a rear cargo door, standard on most cargo aircraft, which made loading slower and more complicated. Still, Antonov took a calculated risk, believing the massive jet could serve a specialized market. After spending years in storage, $20 million was invested to bring the plane back to life. It received new engines, updated avionics, and a reinforced cargo bay. In January 2002, the revitalized An-225 completed its first commercial mission, hauling an enormous 187-ton payload, something that would have required two Boeing 747 freighters to move. The world's largest aircraft was no longer a relic, but a one-of-a-kind lifter capable of doing what no other plane could.
Massive Antonov 124 Ruslan. So we're gonna go inside the Antonov. It looks like it's ready to take the cargo soon. I've never seen a huge cockpit like this. Unbelievable.
Volga 2612 from East Midlands to Toulouse.
It's like a passenger cabin inside a cargo plane Antonov 120.
Over the next 2 decades, the An-225 continued to break records with the gigantic loads it transported. But its extraordinary capabilities came at a high cost. Operating it could run up to $30,000 per hour. That meant the aircraft only flew when no other alternative existed. And with only one ever completed, it remained in a league of its own, turning heads wherever it landed. Meanwhile, a second, partially completed An-225 has sat idle in storage for over 3 decades. Though headlines occasionally suggest it could one day be finished, there's still no clear demand to justify completing it. The original Tu-25 was a machine born in a time when the Soviets were willing to spare no expense to gain the upper hand in space and aviation. While the USSR was racing to build the Buran and match the US Space Shuttle in the 1970s, the Americans were pursuing a different kind of breakthrough. Not by flying higher or faster, but by becoming nearly invisible to enemy radar.
This is the largest plane in the world.
The Antonov is unmatched as far as how extraordinary of a flying machine it is.
I thought, how is that possible? A wing as long as a football field? No way this thing can fly.
The Antonov AN-225 is unique. It set over 200 world records and has a huge global following.
We are carrying some very heavy cargo. For example, to Australia we are bringing a generator. We have so big cargo and now we'll fly with this cargo. How is it possible? But I know it's possible.
This Antonov is the only plane that can load over 100 tons. The generator weighs 117